Okay, so we've got a part 2 question. The topic here today is travel, and they want you to describe a memorable journey you have made. Okay, so where were you going, how you were traveling, why you were making the journey, and what made the journey so memorable. Okay, so I think the first thing to sort of talk about would be, I guess, going on a holiday or a sort of a long trip for a vacation. I think it's a bit of a tricky topic because often the journey isn't that memorable if nothing exciting sort of happened. You could even talk about something to do with the memorable journey, like maybe the day you had to go to your school to pick up your final exam scores, and that was memorable because you were so nervous, or something like that. You could be describing the method of travel sort of in some detail to get some good specific vocabulary points, like describing the car or maybe the train or the route that you took to show off your vocabulary. So I was traveling there by bicycle. It was an old bicycle that I have had for many years. I was cycling along the river to my school. And there's 3 bridges I have to cross to get to my school. I remember on that day, it had been raining for 3 weeks, roughly. So on my way to pick up my exam scores, I had to be careful not to fall off my bike into the river or something like that. Okay, so you can show some more vocabulary. Okay, so let's take a look and see what this candidate has done.
2 years ago, I went to Mexico as my Christmas holiday. At the time, I met my Mexican friends, Sophie and Magali, and I stayed at Magali's home and I did everything with them. So instead of visiting tourist attraction, I went to very many local places and restaurants, and it was so good. It's very memorable and unforgettable trip to me for several reasons. First of all, it was my first hot Christmas. I usually spend my Christmas holiday in Korea and Canada, so always it was very cold, but in Mexico, I could spend hot Christmas holiday, and I did very many summer activities like swimming and surfing on the beach. So it was very special to me. Also, I won scratch lottery ticket on December 1st of that year. So I got $5,000 and I could get 5 days holiday from my work. So I decided to go there, Mexico, and visit my friend just 1 week before my Christmas holiday. Of course, the flight ticket was extremely expensive, but I had enough time and money, and I could have a happy time with my friends in Mexico.
Okay, so that's quite a nice story. So she's describing about her trip to Mexico. I mean, I guess technically, yes, a memorable journey to go from Korea to Mexico. But she's more talking about a memorable holiday or experience. But I don't think you would get like marked down too much for that in the IELTS test. I think that's a perfectly reasonable interpretation of the question. So in terms of her fluency, I thought she was very good in terms of fluency. There's 2 things I like to see in fluency. One is talking smoothly without a lot of hesitations and ums and ums. Okay. Also talking without a lot of self-repetition. So a key part of talking fluently is keeping your story moving forward, introducing more information, and not just repeating the same ideas and the same things over and over again. Okay, so one thing people do when they're not fluent is they get stuck in their story and they keep going back and giving me the same pieces of information over and over. That's not a very fluent thing to do. Also, in terms of pronunciation, I thought very strong in terms of pronunciation. She spoke clearly. I could understand what she was saying. The only thing I would want to see in terms of pronunciation to improve is more intonation in terms of going up and down with her voice. She tended to speak in quite a flat tone all the way through. And so you're talking about a holiday. So you want to show me your excitement. So your voice should be going up at the end of words. Even when she said she won $5,000, okay, that was a really good opportunity to show me some pronunciation features. So in terms of intonation, it could have been stuff, and so I won $5,000 on a scratch card. Okay, can you see how I slowed down the $5,000 to show my stress there? I just slowed down the word to show emphasis. And then you can also send your voice up at the end to show that you're so excited. Going up to show that, okay? So those are that was one area where she could have shown a bit of intonation to show the examiner that you can do those kind of features of English. In terms of vocabulary, I like the way she described something as being the flight tickets were normally extremely expensive. I thought that was a nice use of the word extremely, pretty natural. So that was fine. The place I thought she could have improved is she described it a couple of times as she said, I could spend a hot Christmas holiday. Okay, that's fine. But just saying a hot Christmas holiday isn't showing me very much adventurous vocabulary, okay? So you could say something like, I finally had the opportunity to experience Christmas in a hot climate or in the southern hemisphere. I don't know if Mexico is in the southern hemisphere, maybe it's not. Or, in a totally different climate or in a tropical climate or something like that. You can show me a bit more vocabulary than just saying a hot Christmas holiday. Okay, so that's something this candidate can improve on. In terms of grammar, the grammar was reasonably accurate, but a little bit basic. She stuck mainly to the past simple. So if you go back and listen to it, you can sort of hear it. I stayed, I did, I went, I won. Okay, so she just mainly stayed within this sort of past simple description. That you have to show the examiner that you can do the more complicated grammar. So I wanted to see her take advantage and use some more difficult tenses even, talking about her friend in Mexico. We have been friends for many years. I first met her when I was staying at a language school in the UK or something like that. Okay, so there was a couple of opportunities for her to show me more complex grammar. When she talked about winning the money, I had never had so much money before, or that was the first time in my life I had ever won that. Something, just a little bit of variety. So sometimes with the part 2 answer, you have to have some strategy to drop in some of this more complex grammar to try and boost your score. Okay. There was also a couple of places where she said things like, she said, so it was very special to me. Okay, so this again is kind of sort of quite basic. So it was very special to me. This is kind of a sort of link between the vocab and the grammar. So you could say something like something more advanced and something more natural than very special. So it was the most extraordinary experience of my life. Okay, extraordinary. Or it was particularly meaningful. Anything like that would sort of be a bit more advanced than very special. Okay. She also sort of does this repetition a couple of times of very many. She said things like, I went to very many local places. I did very many activities. We wouldn't use very with many, so just many. I did many activities. I visited many local places. And then again, we can use more advanced vocabulary, many, a lot of, a ton of, something like that. Loads of. Okay, would also be a natural way to improve on that. Okay, so let's take a look and see her question 2.
I think most of young generation of these days prefer to spend holidays with their friends instead of families. Because I think friends usually like same things and have similar tastes and share their hobbies. So we can travel somewhere without any trouble with our friends. But we usually have generation gap with our parents or grandparents, and it can make small trouble or argument during our holidays. And I think it's the main reason why young generation prefer to spend holidays with their friends. Also, I think the biggest benefit of having a holiday from work or study is refreshing. Uh, we can reduce our stress level and refresh by ourselves during the holiday, and we can make new energy to focus on our work and study. So I think when we are very exhausted or annoying to work or study, we need several days of holiday to refresh.
Okay, so that was a reasonably good answer, which, I liked. I thought it was pretty good. I liked in terms of vocabulary. I liked when she talked about traveling with your friends, mean you can travel with people who have similar tastes. I thought that was a nice phrase, very natural to use. I also liked how she used the word exhausted. Exhausted is a nice advanced vocabulary word. The sort of first thing I want to pick up on is in terms of her grammar. She used the phrase, I think most of young generation, okay, which is not really the correct way to say it. So we would say something like, I think most of the younger generation, okay, would prefer to travel with friends. Okay, so it should be younger generation, or I think most young people. Or there's also specific vocabulary words that we use to sort of talk about that. So you can talk about millennials. So that's basically people who were born in the late 80s and 90s. Or you talk about Generation Z, which are those sort of born after the millennium, so the year 2000. So those are sort of common phrases that we would use to sort of talk about, the younger generation versus the older generation. So you say Generation Z, or we just shorten it to Gen Z. And I think the newest one coming up is Gen X. I think that's how they refer to the really sort of young people now. But those are just some kind of phrases that you can use to talk about rather than saying younger generation if you want to. People often sort of talk about millennials and Gen Z. I thought there was one phrase which I just want to highlight. Let me just change my pen color. So one phrase I want to use where she talked about is when she has a problem when she's annoying with work or study. Okay, which isn't the correct phrase. It's good to take a break when you are annoyed with your work or study. Annoyed is good. We can also use other phrases. We can say things like when you're fed up. Or another one we use is burned out. Okay, when you're sort of doing that job where you get up in the morning and you're too tired to even want to go to work, we call it burned out. Okay, so you can say things like, I felt burnt out, or I had to quit my job because I was burning out. So it's literally the similar like to a fire or something like that. When you finished with your barbecue fire and you just let it gradually die out. So you go into your job, you're on fire, you've got all this energy, but then over time you lose your energy, you lose your motivation, and just gradually the fire dies and you become cold. Okay, so burning out. So that's a good phrase to be using, especially talking about this kind of topic. Again, I thought fluency was good and I thought her pronunciation was very solid. Just again, those intonation features are missing exactly the same as her first answer. So let's sort of take a look at the scores. In terms of pronunciation, I thought was reasonably solid. I would probably sort of, I think I would realistically start hitting that 5.5 range. So I would really ask her to practice using emphasis, volume, and pitch, high or low voice tones to try and get a couple of those intonation features in. In terms of vocabulary, I thought probably a 6. It's reasonable for what she wants to do, but there were opportunities where she could have used more advanced language. And again, in terms of grammar, I would sort of give a 5.5. It's accurate, but in terms of range, I wanted to see her take advantage of some of the opportunities to use more sophisticated or difficult grammar. Fluency and coherence, probably around a 6, like made sense. So I think overall a 6.0 for speaking. But I think there was a couple of chances she had in her answer to be more advanced or use more advanced grammar and vocabulary. And I would recommend that she practices taking advantage of those opportunities.